Hey there, welcome to the Focus Podcast with Tara Lee. This is the place where we talk about real life, real relationships, and how to grow through it all. If you're looking for simple mindset shifts, better communication, and deeper connections, you're in the right spot. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the Focus Podcast with Tara Lee. I'm really glad you're here today. If you clicked on this episode, there's a good chance something's going on in your marriage right now that feels really scary. Maybe you feel your spouse has become distant. Maybe they've pulled back emotionally. Maybe they feel cold or irritated or just somewhere else, even when they're right there in front of you. And maybe you've been lying awake wondering, is this already over? Why does everything I say seem to make it worse? And why does it feel like no matter what I do, I can't get back to them? If that's where you are, this episode is for you. Today, we're going to talk about what actually happens inside you when your spouse pulls away, and why the most instinctive thing that you want to do in that moment tends to backfire, and what to do instead when everything in you is panicking. So let's get into it. Let's start at the beginning with the moment you first noticed something shift. For some of you, it was gradual. Conversation started feeling surface level. The warmth got a little cooler. The connection felt more effortful. You'd try to talk and it just wouldn't land in the same way. For others of you, it felt more sudden, like something happened. A fight, a hard season, some combination of stress and distance. And after that, something was different. They pulled back and you could feel it. However it started, here's what that moment usually triggers inside of us. Panic. Maybe not all at once. Maybe it starts as a low-level hum of anxiety, this sense that something's off, something's wrong. But over time, as the distance continues, that hum gets louder. It starts to show up as constant thoughts about the marriage. It starts to show up in how you approach conversations. It starts to show up in how you interpret everything they say or don't say. And here's what panic does that's so important to understand. It narrows your focus. When we feel threatened and emotional distance from the person we love is a threat to our nervous system, we lose access to the part of our brain that helps us think clearly, to respond thoughtfully, and stay connected to ourselves. We go into survival mode, and survival mode in a marriage is really hard to navigate from. So what does survival mode look like in a marriage? What do most people actually do when their spouse pulls away? I want to walk you through a few of the most common patterns because I bet you're going to recognize yourself in at least one of them. The first is pursuit. This is probably the most common because when someone we love goes distant, we want to close that gap. So we reach out more, we try to start conversations, we check in more often. We ask, are you okay? Or what's wrong? Or can we please just talk? We want connection and we keep reaching for it. Now, the impulse here is not the problem. The impulse comes from love, but the way it tends to show up, especially when it's driven by fear, is that it can come across as pressure. It can be intense and come across as urgency. And the more urgency you bring to someone who is already overwhelmed or shut down, the more likely they are to retreat. So the second pattern is over-explaining. This one is especially common when there's been conflict or tension. You want them to understand where you're coming from. You want to fix whatever went wrong. So you replay the conversation. You try to clarify. You keep circling back to the same points because you need them to get it. You need resolution. But here's the thing. Over-explaining when someone is already flooded almost never creates resolution. It usually creates more distance because the message they receive, even if it's not what you intend, is you need to keep engaging with this right now. And if they don't have the capacity for that, they'll shut down even further. The third pattern is meaning making. This is the one that happens mostly in your head, but it drives all kinds of behavior. When your spouse is distant, you start interpreting. They didn't answer my text for 2 hours. That means they don't care. They went to bed without saying goodnight. That means they're done. They seemed fine at dinner. That means they're fine with me, which means they're choosing to be cold. These interpretations can feel real. They feel logical, but they almost always are stories your fear is telling you, not facts about what's happening. And they will shape how you respond in ways that make things harder for you. The fourth is just the low-grade anxiety leak. This one's subtle, but it's really powerful. You're trying to hold it together, but the worry bleeds out anyway. In your tone, in your body language, in the way you ask simple questions that have a layer of something heavier underneath them, in the way that you go quiet and then go distant yourself because you're protecting yourself from rejection. Your spouse can feel all of it. Even when you think you're holding it together, they can feel the tension that you're carrying, and it makes them less likely, not more likely, to move toward you. I want to pause here for a second and say something that might be hard to hear, but is actually really hopeful. The reason all of this matters so much is because you have more influence in this moment than you think. When we're panicking, it can feel like we're powerless, like everything depends on what our spouse decides to do, like we're just waiting and hoping and crossing our fingers. But that's not actually true. The way you show up right now, the energy you bring, the approach that you take, whether you're operating from fear or from something steadier, that matters enormously. Not because you can control your spouse, because you can't, but because you can either create more safety or less safety, more pressure or less pressure, more space for them to eventually move back toward you, or a dynamic that makes it harder. You're not powerless here. You just need to be using your power well, and using it well requires getting out of survival mode first. Okay, so if the instinctive moves tend to backfire, what do you actually do when your spouse is pulling away and everything in you wants to reach for them? I want to give you 4 things, 4 real practical shifts that you can make. The first is learn to recognize when fear is driving. This is foundational. Before you send the text, start the conversation, or ask the question, check in with yourself. Ask, am I doing this from a calm, grounded place, or am I doing this because I'm scared and I need to feel better? There's nothing wrong with being scared, but acting from fear rarely creates the outcome that you're hoping for. When you learn to catch the fear before it drives your behavior, you change everything. What does that look like practically? It might mean pausing before you respond. It might mean taking a walk or taking 10 minutes to breathe before you try and have a hard conversation. It might mean saying to yourself, I'm feeling panicked right now. This isn't the moment to lead with that. The goal is not to suppress your feelings, it's to get grounded before you act. The second thing is let space exist without filling it with urgency. This is really hard, especially if you're someone who tends to pursue connection. Letting space sit there feels excruciating. It feels like giving up. It can feel like the distance is just going to grow. But here's what I want you to consider. Urgency is not the same as care, and pressure is not the same as pursuit. Letting space breathe and being present without being intense, being warm without being urgent, actually communicates something powerful. It communicates, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to make this harder than it already is. That kind of steadiness is safe to move toward. The third is separate facts from stories. This is one of the most practical things you can do in the middle of a marriage crisis, and it sounds simple, but it's actually really hard to do when your nervous system is activated. Here's how it works. You take what you actually know, the facts, and you separate them from what you're telling yourself about what those facts mean. So, for example, the fact is your spouse came home, didn't say much, and went to watch TV alone. That's what happened. The story is, they're done with me. They don't care. This is how our relationship ends. The fact might be the same, but there are probably 20 different stories you could tell about that moment. They were exhausted. They had a hard day at work. They don't know how to bridge the gap, so they retreat. They felt awkward and didn't know what to say. You don't know which one is true, and when you're operating from the most catastrophic story, it shapes how you approach them, which usually confirms the story. So get in the habit of asking, what do I actually know, and what am I adding to it? That alone can lower your nervous system significantly. The fourth is take care of yourself in this season. Now, I know this one feels like a platitude. I know when your marriage is in pain, the last thing you want to hear is make sure you're going for walks. And I get it, but here is why this actually matters beyond self-care advice. Who you are when you show up in your marriage is shaped by what you're doing with yourself everywhere else. If you're white-knuckling through every day, not sleeping, not talking to anyone, isolating and putting every ounce of your emotional energy into monitoring the state of your marriage, you're going to be depleted. And depleted people do not make steady, grounded, safe partners. When you stay connected to yourself, to your friendships, your faith, your body, the things that give you life, you become more stable. And stable is what your marriage needs from you right now. I want to close with something a little broader. When a spouse pulls away, it's tempting to see it as a crisis that needs to be solved immediately. And I understand that. It's painful. The distance is real. The fear is real. But what I've seen in my work over and over again is that how one spouse shows up in this season has an outsized impact on what happens next. The marriages that start to move, the ones where the distance slowly starts to close, are usually the ones where at least one person chose to get steadier, to stop adding fuel to the fear, to become a little safer, a little calmer, a little less reactive. That is hard work. It is some of the hardest work that there is, because it means taking your eyes off of your spouse for a moment and putting them on yourself. Not because your needs don't matter, they absolutely do, but because the most powerful thing you can do right now is become someone who feels safe to come back to. That's what I'm going to be talking about a lot this month. We're going to spend the next few weeks going deeper into all of this, the conversations, the feeling of doing this alone, and the thought patterns that make everything feel heavier. If you're in the middle of this right now and you know your fear is driving your responses, I want to help you find your footing. Head to TaraLeeEddington.com and book a consultation call with me. Let's figure out what your next right move actually looks like. If this episode helped you in some way, please share it with someone who needs it. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you do so that you don't miss what's coming this month. So take care of yourself this week. Remember, what you focus on expands. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the Focus Podcast. If something stood out or helped you in some way, feel free to share it or leave a quick review. It means a lot. Keep showing up, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next episode.